to you now.
Yeah, and thanks again, Steve. It's invaluable to have you kind of on this team with us. So we're incredibly appreciative. That was one heck of an intro. Nicole, I can't do that same service for you. But the reason we're sort of co-introing is because when we were going to do the non-virtual TikTok, Andrew, or Nupper, as we're now going to call him, and Nicole were to do this together. It's really important to discuss together. But nonetheless, I'm going to go ahead and intro Nicole so you know who she is. I had the pleasure of meeting her briefly last year. She did a town hall in my area, and that was because they were going to be kicking off a free tick testing in Pennsylvania. And that was about a year ago, a little over a year ago, which I thought was phenomenal because so many people don't understand that testing a tick is incredibly important. And not everybody wanted to spend $50 to be able to test a tick. And so the fact that we were able to have that in our state is incredible. So a little bit about Nicole briefly is that she's the laboratory director and a professor of microbiology at East Stroudsburg University, where she graduated from in 2014. She is with the DNA lab, and that lab is a focus on researching on ticks and tick-borne diseases. When I get back to my screen here, there we go. And like I said before, it was led by the initiative of local representatives. A woman who's been amazing for us is Rosemary Brown. And she started this whole PA Tick Lab Research Lab, which is the free tick testing for all Pennsylvania residents. And it is statewide. I know the data has been incredible that they have collected. It's very accurate in early diagnostics so that people who are bitten by a tick and aren't experiencing any symptoms at that time, they can still get a full report about what their tick could be sick with. Additionally, I am thrilled to say that even during COVID and the lack of, and where we have non-essential workers, our state has still approved that Nicole can keep tick testing, which right now everybody's going outside. So it is even more paramount that they continue. So with that said, thank you so much, Nicole Chinicci with ticklab.org and East Stroudsburg University. We appreciate you being here. Thank you.
All right, good morning, everyone. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen here with everyone and start today's talk. Thank you, Carrie, for the introduction. So I'm Nicole Chinicci. I am the director of the DNA lab of East Stroudsburg University. And last year, as of April 1st, so just about a year ago, it's a little bit of our anniversary this weekend, we launched the Tick Research Lab of Pennsylvania. And this lab was developed through funds from the state, the Department of Health and Health and Human Services, and that is to do free tick testing for Pennsylvania residents. We do tick testing for any resident of any state, but that does require a fee to do so, but Pennsylvania residents can get the basic panel for free. All of our information is live on our website, so you can track infections in your state and in your county, and I will talk all about that. But today, really, my presentation, I'm going to talk a lot about ticks in general so that you have a better understanding of the life and ecology of the tick. This will help you prevent a tick bite, hopefully in the future, as well as share information with your friends and family to help them prevent a tick bite. So I'll go over tick-borne diseases in Pennsylvania as well as the world in general, and then talk a little bit more about tick ecology. Then we'll get into some prevention information, and then I will talk a little bit more about our tick testing services so that you're familiar with what we do. And then Andrew will talk, and we'll do a group Q&A at the end. So if you have any questions, write them down, because I'd love to answer any questions that anybody might have. So in general, you guys all probably are aware that Lyme disease is one of the fastest growing infectious diseases in the United States. We might get surpassed by COVID-19 this year, but again, this has been around for a very long time. And each year over and over, we have an increased number of cases. And the interesting part now is that we don't like to just say Lyme disease because it's tick-borne diseases. We have so many diseases that ticks can spread. They carry multiple diseases, and a lot of times they'll carry these diseases at the same time. So we have anaplasmosis, which is also becoming very common and emerging very rapidly. Rocky Mountain spotted fever, babesiosis, Powassan virus, tularemia. So there's a lot of different diseases that these ticks can spread. And each year, these diseases are increasing. You can see geographically across the United States, these blue dots are representing cases, and this is specifically for Lyme disease, and I have other tick-borne diseases in a couple slides. So it is very heavily concentrated in the Northeast and Midwest. However, you'll see that there are blue dots across the United States. So any state can be at risk of a tick-borne disease. And the tick that carries the majority of the diseases is the black-legged deer tick. And this tick has been found in every US state except for Hawaii. So there is a chance for exposure to these diseases in any of the US states. Here's a map depicting other diseases that ticks can carry. Red is the Rocky Mountain spotted fever, which you can see is pretty widely distributed across the state. This map is not going to be 100% accurate because it's based off of reportable diseases to the CDC, and not every state requires diseases to be reported. So Pennsylvania, for instance, in this picture is not showing babesiosis cases. However, babesiosis is very common in our state. So it is only dependent on if that state is reporting these diseases. But it does give you an idea that these diseases are found throughout the United States. The onset of disease will be based off the life cycle of a tick. So here is a map showing the different months starting with January through December. And you can see that the increase in cases are occurring in June, July, and August. That is based off of ticks emerging from the winter. So once temperatures are above freezing, ticks will come out as long as there's no snow cover, and they'll start to quest and they'll start to look for a host. During that time, they'll attach and feed, and most individuals don't see a tick on them. 50% of individuals don't remember seeing a tick. So it's important to do a tick check. And then usually about 10 days, a week to 10 days later, sometimes a month, there could be late onset of symptoms. The symptoms will emerge. So if you're exposed to a tick in May, you might not see symptoms or get diagnosed until June. So there's a little bit of a delay in that. So you'll see that our onset of cases really increase in June and July. And that's after that nymphal life stage of the tick. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a couple of slides. Cases amongst age groups. And you'll see here that we have a real high number of cases in our youth. So between the ages of 5 to 10 is at highest risk for a tick bite and a tick-borne disease. And if you think about why that could be and what they're doing at that age, a lot of it has to do off of habits. So what are our children doing? They're outside, they're playing with their friends, they might be rolling around in leaves, creating leaf piles and jumping into it, things that might be considered risky or a risky activity, putting them at risk of a tick bite. Also, children, they might not understand 100% on how to do a tick check. So it's very important for us to educate our children, and so they are aware that if a tick is crawling on them or biting, that they notify an adult and remove it immediately. So that's also important. And then again, we have another kind of emerging of cases between the ages of 45 and 60, and a lot of times that's due to picking up hobbies. So if you have children and your children are going off to college and you kind of become an empty nester, you start to think about things that you can do and you have more time on your hands. So usually we pick up gardening, we pick up hiking, and we pick up these outdoor activities that could be putting us at risk, golfing, anything along those lines. So we have a spike in cases at that age group as well. But any age, anytime you're outside and it's nice weather, you could be at risk of a tick bite. So a little background on ticks. Ticks are ectoparasites, meaning that they'll feed externally on our bodies. So mammals, birds, and reptiles that they'll choose. They do not burrow 100% into your body. So they'll burrow just their mouth parts and feed externally. They're part of the arachnid family, and the arachnid family is spiders, and they're actually classified as spiders because in their nymph and adult life stages, they have 8 legs. So they would be classified as a spider, which is a little bit different than a mosquito, which has 6 legs, and an insect. They are found globally. So this isn't just an issue in the United States. Tick-borne diseases are an issue globally. Europe has a huge issue. Asian areas also have very big issues with some of these tick-borne diseases. And I'll talk a little bit about that spread of some ticks and these ticks into the United States with some of the ticks that have come over and have become invasive. The black-legged deer tick The black-legged tick, we refer to it because of its black legs. You may have heard of it as a deer tick. We try not to say deer tick anymore, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later. But this tick has been found in every U.S. state except for Hawaii. And it is the carrier of Lyme disease and the transmitter of Lyme disease, as well as a lot of other diseases. So we consider this tick to be the most dangerous of the ticks that we find in the United States. Not that the other ticks are not as dangerous, it just carries more of the diseases that are more prevalent that we see. It has 4 life stages. All ticks have 4 life stages. Essentially, they start off as eggs, and they hatch into their larval life stage, and then into their nymph life stage, and then into their adult life stage. As larvae, nymph, and adults, those are considered their feeding life stages, so they require 1 blood meal to take in that blood meal, and then they transition into their next life cycle. Typically, the ticks that will feed on an adult or on a child are the nymph and adult ticks, but sometimes we can encounter those larval ticks as well, and I'll talk a little bit more about that life cycle in a few slides. These ticks are capable of transmitting many different types of diseases. And these diseases are maintained in the wildlife populations, more specifically in the small mammal populations, such as white-footed mice, chipmunks, and shrews. White-footed mice are going to be the culprit for transmitting the majority of the diseases that we see in tick populations. They're considered what's called a reservoir host, giving them the capabilities of transmitting a disease from their system or their blood system into a tick. Some animals, such as ourselves, or mammals, are not capable of doing that process. And then, so these diseases would be transferred when a tick's feeding on a small mammal in the early life stages to the tick, and then that tick can carry that disease between its life stages, and sometimes even give it to its eggs that it lays. So a little bit about ticks, just some important details so that if you are exposed to a tick, you kind of have an understanding of what you are potentially looking at in disease transmission. We have 3 common ticks in the United States that transmit diseases. We have the black-legged tick. For any of my West Coast participants right now, you would have the Western black-legged tick. Essentially, they're identical in their characteristics. The only difference is geographic, where they're from. So the black-legged tick has black legs. It has a black shield, which is also called the scutum, and then it has a red body. And its red body in the adult stage lacks festoons. So there's these little square-like protrusions on its backside. That is lacking in the black-legged tick. It is also the smallest tick that we have in the United States. The American dog tick, very similar to the Rocky Mountain wood tick as well as the Pacific Coast tick for my West Coast folks. They have this white coloration across their dorsal side and on their shield. And then they have these festoons. The Lone Star tick, these are all adult females, by the way. I'll show you other versions in a couple more slides. The adult female also has festoons, a little bit more rounds, and they have that white dot or speck on their backside. So individually, so you can kind of see the different life stages of these ticks. Black-legged tick, again, is also very similar to the Western black-legged tick, which would be found in the western portion of the United States. The black-legged tick has been found in every U.S. state. You have a larva, you have a nymph, you have your adult male, and your adult female. The 2 ticks that are most important for transmission of disease are your adult females and your nymphs, okay? So the nymphs are very tiny. They're starting to emerge in Pennsylvania at this time. So states a little south of Pennsylvania are probably have already seen these for a few weeks. And we have the adult females out. Adult males are looking to mate with the female, so they're not associated with disease transmission, but they may attach. So you just have to still be careful on that. Larvae, very small number of diseases will be transferred from the mom to the egg, so the larvae will have a low prevalence of disease. There are a couple of diseases like relapsing fevers that they can carry, but less common. Okay, so that's the black-legged tick. American dog tick is next. American dog tick, the adult female and adult male are the ones we see most common in the springtime, so a couple more weeks we'll see these ticks emerging. We typically don't see the nymph or larvae feeding on humans. They tend to stay in the wildlife populations. The female is going to be associated with disease transmission. Diseases would include Rocky Mountain spotted fever, lichiosis, tularemia, diseases such as that. Can dog ticks carry Lyme disease? They actually can. They have a low prevalence and they can carry it, but they are incapable of transmitting it. They are much larger in size than the black-legged tick, and the white coloration, you have a U shape for the female and this lightning shape across the entire dorsal side of the male. And that's how you would determine the difference. And then the Lone Star tick. Lone Star tick is considered to be the most aggressive tick. And I'll talk a little bit more about their behaviors in a few more slides. Here's that female with the white dot. Male has no coloration except for on those festoons. You might see some white coloration there. And then the nymph tick is also common for disease transmission and can feed on humans. It's very difficult to determine a difference between a nymph lone star and a nymph black-legged tick unless really you have a microscope. But the black legs would be what you would be looking for, the difference in that black leg region. And then there's some differences in the shield or scutum, but you would need a microscope to see that. And then the larvae. The larvae for the Lone Star tick tend to attach to humans. You may have heard of people saying, oh, I sat in a bed of ticks. And that's true to a sense because when a female lays eggs, she could lay between 2,000 and 4,000 eggs, and they'll all hatch at the same time relatively. So if you have all of these larval ticks hatching and you sit down in that area, you could have a couple hundred to a couple thousand ticks in one area. So they are very aggressive, and we do find the Lone Star larva feeding on humans more so than the other tick species in the United States. And then I was talking about that invasive species. The Asian longhorn tick in 2017 was found in Hunterdon County, New Jersey, infesting a sheep. Since then, it has been found in, I believe it's about 14 to 16 US states. And this map that you're seeing here are established, are your X's where tick habitat has been found, and then red is high prevalence for suitable habitat, and then orange is a little less suitable, down to white it'd be not suitable for this tick to survive. So this tick did come over from Asia. It's considered to be invasive. It is associated with diseases in Asia, but we have not found to date any of these ticks in the United States to carry diseases. They have the potential to carry the diseases that we do have in the United States. Interesting enough with this tick, like the Lone Star tick, and you may have heard of this, is the alpha-gal allergy or a red meat allergy. Both of these ticks have that capability. So if you are exposed to a bite or multiple bites, you could develop this alpha-gal allergy, essentially creating an allergic reaction to red meats because of a mimicry allergy reaction. Ticks change in size, so it's very important that you kind of understand how that tick is, what it looks like. A lot of times if you bring an engorged tick to a physician, physicians are not trained as entomologists. They're not trained to understand what an insect looks like. They're medically trained, so they're very good at understanding the disease and the symptoms. But when you get an engorged tick, it becomes very difficult to see some of these characteristics that you have. So you see an engorged adult female dog tick here, Lone Star tick, and a deer tick. If you don't see that white coloration on the shield for the dog tick, that white speck for the Lone Star tick, you could misidentify these ticks. And once they become engorged, they relatively all are close to being the same size. So you just got to be careful that you know what you're looking for, because the more that the longer the tick is feeding on you, the higher your risk is for diseases. So some ticks can start to transmit diseases around 6 to 10 hours. Some ticks it takes a little longer, about 18 to 24 hours. Some are in 15 minutes. So once a tick attaches, the longer that tick is attached and feeding, the greater your risk is. So when it gets into this grape-like shape, that is going to be your highest risk of disease transmission. So anything that tick was carrying would put you at higher risk of transmission. So you just got to be careful when it's very large. And we have a free identification on our website. So if you're ever curious and you're unknown on what tick it is, you can submit a picture to the ticklab.org website, and we identify those on a daily basis. So within 24 hours, you can see what your tick is, and we'll identify that for free. So tick behavior, some things to just go over so you have a better idea when you're outside of what you're looking at for tick behavior. So ticks do not have wings, so they are not capable of flying. However, if it's very windy, they could take off in the wind because they are very light and they could kind of get pulled in the wind, but they're not flying essentially. And they cannot jump. They don't have mechanisms in their legs that would create that propulsion motion. So they are essentially, what they're doing is sitting on the blades of grass, and this is called an ambush questing behavior, just like these ticks here, and they're sticking out their forelegs. Underneath their forelegs, they have these old factory called halar organs, and they're sensing CO2, heat, pheromones, any body odors, and that gets them activated. And that activation makes them move their legs a little faster, and then once you brush by, they grab on. Typically, they'll quest from a few inches to a couple feet off of the ground. So when they start to crawl on you, usually they're crawling from the hip level and down, and they'll crawl up to an area that they feel comfortable with attaching and feeding. And I'll talk a little bit about those specific areas in a couple more slides. So that's the ambush questing. The Lone Star tick is a little bit different. I talked about that being a very aggressive tick. The Lone Star tick will actually hunt down the source. So when they sense that CO2 and those pheromones, they'll crawl closer to the source and try to attach that way. They don't do this questing and kind of ambush waiting for a host to walk by. These are some photos showing some tick habitat. So ticks have a exoskeleton, if you know anything about some insects and entomology, and they are very susceptible to drying out. And drying and high heat are the two things that help to essentially kill ticks. So areas that are cool and moist, that you see here, or areas where you have wildlife like mice and deer, are going to be high areas for tick populations. So stone walls, now you get a lot high mice population here, so you'll get a high tick population. Under trees in an area of some water, so they can have that moisture to extract to keep themselves moist. Down trees, again, moisture that they can extract. Leaf litter, they love leaf litter. Leaf litter is very common for them to tucker down underneath of in the winter so they can survive. And tall grass. Okay, so those are some really good tick habitats that you want to be careful with when you're outdoors. So the life cycle of a tick is very important because it will let you know time of the year which ticks you're looking for, and then also discuss the relative to your exposure. So what's your risk of being exposed? The tick life cycle is about 2 years. However, they have become very pesty recently, and they can last and survive longer. They can go hundreds of days without a blood meal. In a laboratory setting, in an experimental setting, they can go almost an entire year without feeding in perfect, humidity and levels like that. So they only require one blood meal, and they can survive without that blood meal for some time. So that's how you can kind of picture how they survive over the winters. They're tuckered down underneath that leaf litter, sometimes the snow covers, incubating them, and they'll just wait. And then once the winter is over and spring emerges, they emerge with the warmer temperatures. They feed as larvae, nymphs, and adults, so they have 3 feeding life stages. And the nymph and adult are going to be the most common for transmitting diseases, but the larval ticks can also transmit diseases. We consider the nymph tick to be the most dangerous because of its size. So they actually do have a lower prevalence, or they carry a lower percentage of diseases, but because they're so small that typically someone won't find a nymph tick feeding on them. The average is about 30 hours. So the average person, it takes them about 30 hours to find that nymph. And we collected all that information with our tick testing services. So when we look at a tick, we can tell relatively how long it's feeding based off of its shield to body ratio. And it's on average about 30 hours for us to see this nymph tick on us. The adult tick is around 21 hours. So we tend to find the adult tick a little faster because it's a little larger in size. So you can see here the life cycle. It's eggs, larvae, nymph, and adults. The larvae would feed on an infected mouse, and it could potentially pick up the disease, and then it would carry that disease, which is, here's the spirochete of Lyme disease, Borrelia burgdorferi, and it would carry that disease across its life stages at that point. So as a nymph or as an adult, it could feed on us as a host and transmit the different diseases. And that's the same type of life cycle you would see for these other diseases as well. And deer, the myth is, and this is one reason why we don't like to call them deer ticks anymore, is deer are not capable of transmitting the bacteria that causes Lyme disease. The mice is going to be the most common for that transmission cycle. However, deer do participate and critique in increasing the number of ticks that we see in the environment. So they are a very good host for giving a tick a blood meal. And one adult female tick getting a full blood meal and fertilized by a male will lay 2,000 to 4,000 eggs. And on average, one deer can host up to 400 ticks. So you can see how one deer can really increase the number of ticks that we have in our population. So the deer do play a very good role in the number of ticks that we have, and the mice play a good role in the disease prevalence that we have. And when you add forest fragmentation in there and increase your mice population, you can see how in some of these residential areas we can have a huge increase in the tick diseases that we see. So here's just showing the life cycle by month. So right now we are in this early April phase, so we're still seeing the adult deer ticks that have emerged from winter. And I can say with the last few weeks, we have had an influx of ticks. We tested a 400% increase in number of ticks this year than we did last year. That has a lot to do with weather because it's been nice out. We've had no snow cover in March. Usually we get some snowstorms. And it also has to do with COVID-19. We have folks now that are home going outside and getting a head start on their gardening and yard work. So those two factors have put people at greater risk. We are starting to see that nymph tick emerge a little earlier than normal. So we have our adults, we have nymphs, and we'll get an overlap of the adults and nymphs during our May-June timeframe. You can see as our human cases increase when the nymph tick's out. Late summer, we get the larval ticks when it gets a little too hot for our nymph and adult ticks to emerge. And then we get an influx of the adult ticks again in the winter, our fall months and winter months until snowfall. And again, if your temperatures are above freezing, you could be at risk of a tick bite all year. We had a lot of tick bites in Pennsylvania in January and February because we had no snowfall and we had a lot of weather that was above freezing. So people were still at risk. And here's kind of a true to size. Here's your nymph and adult female. So you can really see how tiny that nymph is compared to the female. So if you're exposed to a tick, it's very important that you remove the tick correctly. So we're getting into a little bit of our prevention information. If you don't remove the tick correctly and the tick's feeding on you, you could put yourself at greater risk of exposure to these diseases. Some of these diseases are carried in the salivary glands of the tick, so they would transmit much faster upon a bite. But other diseases are carried in the midgut of the tick, so they require a blood meal to activate that disease to then transmit through the salivary glands into us. But if you squeeze the body of the tick or you agitate the tick, it could push its contents within its stomach into you. So proper tick removal. Use a thin pointed tweezer. Grab at the base of the mouth parts where it's meeting your skin and you'll pull straight up and out. Okay, you want to avoid pinching your skin as best as possible. You can use a tick removal tool that will slide under here and pull it straight up and out. But it's that surprise attack. The tick doesn't want to release from you. It wants to get its blood meal. So you want to pull the tick out without the tick knowing that you're removing the food source. I like to compare this to a dog. If you're feeding your dog and then you pulled the bowl away from your dog or even a cat, your animal's going to get a little angry with you. It wants to eat. So when you take its food source away, it gets angry. So we want to do that surprise attack to remove it as quickly as possible. We want to avoid burning the tick. Petroleum jelly, essential oils, Dove soap encircling around the alcohol, anything that would allow the tick to back out on its own is going to upset the tick and it could push its contents into you. So thin point tweezers, base of the mouth parts, and pull straight up and out. So a little prevention. We want to avoid the tick taxi and the tick hitchhiking onto us, so we got to do some prevention. And at this time of the year, we're at high risk of tick bite because we're outdoors doing high risk activities. And I'll show you a little bit in a couple more slides of when we did our research with the Tick Research Lab over the last year. We have a survey on our website that we ask you to participate in and give us an idea of the best guess to how you were exposed to a tick bite. And 75% of our tick submissions were from residential backyards, participating in yard work, gardening, or playing in the yard. So you're at greatest risk for a tick bite in your own backyard. So you really want to make sure that you're protecting yourself when you're outdoors. So what can you do? You can wear light colored clothing, so ticks are easy to sight. So ticks aren't repelled from a light colored clothing, but we can then see the ticks crawling on us easily if we have lighter colored clothing, since they're darker in color. You can wear a hat to avoid them getting underneath your hair and within your hair. Long sleeves so that you can see them again crawling on your sleeve as opposed to crawling onto your actual skin and being able to attach. Long pants, even tucking your pants into your socks so that they can't crawl underneath of your pant leg. And considered using a tick spray, either some type of repellent where you would treat your clothing, like a permethrin repellent, or a spray that you would spray on your skin. You can use a deep base spray or a natural spray. There are studies that have been shown that if you just treat your shoes, your shoelaces, and your pants and your socks, you can decrease your exposure by about 70%. So just treating from your knees down will really decrease your risk of a tick bite. So those are some prevention things. If you are outdoors and you're come indoors when you're done, you should throw your clothing into the dryer on high heat. Don't let it sit in your house because the ticks, again, could crawl off and survive hundreds of days without attaching. So put it in the dryer on high heat, and that would kill any ticks that hitchhiked in on with you. And I'll leave the pet prevention for Andrew to talk about in a couple minutes. So just lastly, I just want to talk a little bit about ticklab.org, which is our tick testing website and the research that we do here at East Stroudsburg University. This is a tick testing program that is free for PA residents. I apologize, other states you do have to pay. I am working to see if I can get some funds so that we could subsidize other states as well. And this initiative is twofold. Tick testing is important because it can give you early detection information. It lets you know if you've been exposed to any diseases. It's not diagnosing you with a disease, but it does let you know if the tick was a carrier. And if a tick is a carrier, it does put you at risk. So now you are aware if symptoms start to emerge, that these symptoms could be related to that tick bite, and it can help you and your physician get you diagnosed a little sooner, essentially before symptoms even start. It also is giving us a lot of information on tick-borne diseases, both in Pennsylvania down to the county level and in other states. And we're starting to be able to identify hotspots, and we're working with Department of Environmental Protection to essentially start to evaluate these areas for prevention and sprays and what we can do in those areas to decrease our tick population. So it's giving us a lot of important information on the government level too, to combat these diseases. We're getting a distribution of ticks. Where are we finding Lone Star ticks? Are we finding Asian longhorn ticks? So we're getting a sense of that distribution of ticks and when they emerge so that we can alert the residents. Like right now, we're seeing nymph ticks, and that's a little unprecedented. Typically, you don't see those till late April, early May. So it's important to know when you're outdoors that you need to look for that small, tiny poppy seed tick. All of our results are reported live on our website, so you can go on at any time. You could switch it to the state that you're in, and you can go down by diseases, both by the deer tick, black-legged tick to non-deer tick, and kind of get a sense of the diseases and the number of ticks that we have tested. So how is it done? If you remove your tick, you could just place it in a sealed plastic bag. You visit our website, ticklab.org. You fill out the order form. You mail in, you get a voucher form you'll print off, and you mail in with your tick to our lab, and your results are completed within 72 hours. Okay, there's no kit needed, so it's really simple. Once you get that tick, within 5 minutes, you can have it in the mailbox off to us. The free basic panel is this. So if you're in Pennsylvania, it's free. If you're outside of Pennsylvania, it's $50. You get Lyme disease, anaplasmosis, and babesiosis if it's a black-legged tick. Again, these are the 3 most common ticks we find in the United States. PA residents do get Powassan virus as well. And then the non-deer ticks, you get Lyme disease, ehrlichiosis, Rocky Mountain spotted fever, and tularemia. Here's just some depictions of some of our results. So the distribution of the ticks across the state, so total number of ticks that we find, and then the prevalence rate. So you could see that the north central Pennsylvania has the highest prevalence rate of 59% of those ticks are infected. And then the lowest is not very low, but 47% in the Northwest region. And then by diseases by region, so Lyme disease most prevalent in North Central, but still in the 40% in other areas. This is the adult prevalence rate compared to the nymph prevalence rate. So I did talk about nymphs do have a lower prevalence rate of diseases, and we're showing that here. So it could be as low as just about 27%. and as high as 32% of the nymph ticks are infected, and pretty much 50% of the adult ticks. And then this is combination, so anaplasmosis in the 20%, babesiosis 2 to 5%, and Powassan virus, anywhere between 1 and 3% of ticks are infected. Then the non-zero ticks, these are dog tick infection rates, and you can see in Pennsylvania, this is just for Pennsylvania, sorry if you're not in Pennsylvania. We have ehrlichiosis common in some of, or well, present, in some of our regions. Rocky Mountain spotted fever is pretty common, and very low rates of tularemia. Co-infections are also common in ticks. So you can see here, 11.6% of our ticks come back positive for more than one disease. And then for 3 or more diseases, it's less than 1%, but there is a chance that could occur. Again, exposure, area of exposure where people are most frequently being exposed. And this is out of about 6,000 people that I pulled for the database. Residential areas is going to be at your greatest risk. And then in your wooded areas, farmland, state parks. This is age, the distribution of age along with activity. So age 3, 6, 9, you can see that we have a really high number of ticks that we tested for that age group as well. So this, if you overlap this with the CDC's map, it's the same thing you see with cases, very high number of cases in children, and then again in your 45 to 60 age range. And the activity, this blue line here, is playing in the backyard. So you can see this keeps spiking in most of these areas because that's what's the activity that's at greatest risk. So I'm going to end that. Save your questions for after Andrew's done, but our website is ticklab.org. Again, we have a lot of prevention information on there. The tick testing information and statistics are up there. And we are also on social media, so you can follow us at Ticklab, PA Ticklab, on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And we post a lot of different prevention information, as well as we will be starting next Friday, posting the high risk and ticks that you should be looking for. So thank you for listening, and enjoy the rest of the presentation.